You're with Clement Manyathela.
702.
It's 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. We started a new series last week, which has been fascinating about South African wars. It's like a history lesson, and I love history, and I think all of us need to be interested in what has happened before our time here, because that helps us understand where we find ourselves. So we've been looking at South African wars. Last week we started with the first Boer War. So today we're discussing the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879. This was one of the great 19th century battles that played out in what is today northern KwaZulu-Natal province, when you had British forces invading Zululand. They wanted to subjugate the kingdom, at the time ruled by King Cetshwayo. While it was relatively short-lived, this Anglo-Zulu War of 1879 has been the subject of numerous historical studies. I mean, how many films have we seen? Works of fiction, international films. And today, that war is actually considered one of Britain's worst colonial defeats. So that's what we're looking at today with Shalo Mbatha, who's the author and Royal Zulu historian, who is joining us via Zoom. And if you've got your own questions around the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, please bring them up on 011-883-0702. Maybe you want to share an interesting thing that piqued your interest, or something fascinating that you understand about this Anglo-Zulu War. Why don't you send us a WhatsApp on 072-702-1702. Shalo Mbatha joins us now on the line. Good morning. Thank you for making time for us.
Hey, Clement, thank you so much. I'd really like to thank 702 for keeping the memories of our gallant ancestors, alive by talking about their heroic deeds back in those ugly days. And before we continue, Clement, allow me to greet and acknowledge His Majesty King Mrs. Zulu, the royal family, Amabutho, Izinduna, and the whole Zulu nation, as well as South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shalo. So let's start with what Zululand actually looked like before the Anglo-Zulu War. Just politically, economically, socially, what was the setup?
Okay. I'm glad that you called it the Anglo-Zulu War. We need to put some certain things into perspective, Clement. You know how they say history is written by the victors? The Anglo-Zulu War's proper word name is Isandlwana War, because the Zulu were victorious. Think about it. Nobody ever talks about the Gettysburg battles, remember, in America. They don't call it the Anglo-American War. So they call it the Gettysburg battle. So before we go ahead, it is Isandlwana War. Before our lives were brutally disrupted by colonialists, Zululand was a structured kingdom, politically centralized under a monarch, and it was arranged or organized, if you like, by Amabutho, who were also the labor force, defense force, and the protectors of the weak and the elderly, And also economically, the cattle were the currency, which linked your status, your marriage, and diplomacy, which, when you wanted to get in touch with other kingdoms, you swapped cattle, And also it was a very disciplined, spiritual, and self-reliant society. That's what they disturbed.
So what were some of the tensions then between the Zulu kingdom and the British Empire prior to the war? Because at some point there were even, ultimatums that they issued to the king.
The British had come to South Africa during King Shaka's time in 1828. So by 1879, they were already starting to, how can I put this, to perfect a system of oppression of the Zulu people and all African people on the eastern seaboard of South Africa. And so they were encroaching. Think of 1828 up to, if you like, 1879. There had been a kingdom that King Shaka started, which had put into place in 60 years before. So by 1879, King Cetshwayo was on the throne, and they already understood how the invaders were behaving. So King Cetshwayo, which had never actually stopped from King Shaka's time, they organized themselves into regiments and into very, very big, divisions, military divisions. And they were prepared for the big war that, if you like, King Shaka had prepared for. So when the white people, which I'll call it the post, they were not only the British, they had the Germans, they had the Russians and the Polish, who all, when they came to invade Zululand in 1879, there were actually 6 nations, okay, that came to disrupt or to come and try and take the land of the Zulu in 1879. One of the tensions was the British had decided that the Zulu were too organized in their lifestyles. And whenever you try to negotiate with them, they'd always out-negotiate you. So they started making up things like the Zulu had killed some Christians, that King Cetshwayo had invaded their land, as if white people, when they got off the ships, they came land with them. They started calling our country or our land, our continent, theirs. And I just stick to the thing of the Christianity. One of the top generals in the Zulu Empire, his 5 wives had converted to Christianity, and their husband was not happy. When he told them that they have to pay the ultimate price because you cannot join another god, when as far as the Zulus were concerned, King Cetshwayo was God on this planet, they ran away to find refuge under a white settlement. And fast forward, one of the things that they accused King Cetshwayo for was that he was responsible for the death of those women. And when he tried to explain to them that, no, actually, I don't know what you're talking about, let me investigate, they then gave him an ultimatum. And as I explained much of all this information in detail in my book, they then called them next to Mandeni, some river there, under a tree, which we still call the ultimatum tree. Then they gave the Zulu ultimatum for, I think it was about 10 days, and said, if you do not do the following, one of them was that returning those women. They also claimed that the Zulu had stolen some cows. If you don't do that, you have declared war against the British Empire. So King Cetshwayo, when he got the ultimatum, he called all his divisions, he called his generals, and he said, guys, this is what we're looking at. And they said, Zulus, we have never lived under threats and will not let anyone threaten us. If war they want, war they will get. And it broke the back of the negotiations. And then 10 days later, the British started moving towards Zululand, and the Zulu regiments were ready for them. And then they met under the small little mountain. It was actually a hill, Isandlwana. That's where the first contact happened.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that and what the approach of the Zulu regiments and also the British military, what was their approach like to the battle? Because the Battle of Isandlwana, probably the most comprehensive defeat of a British army by an indigenous people without firearms in the entire history of the British Empire. And I'm just wondering what the approach was. Like, was it always the plan, how it manifested itself, that battle as far as Zulu regiments are concerned? And what was the plan from the British military as well?
Clement, it's so great that we're having this conversation. I have to put certain things into perspective and perhaps in the correct what actually happened there. First and foremost, the Zulu outnumbered the British. Mm-hmm. They were better organized. They were more disciplined. Let's start with the British forces. The way they underestimated the Zulu army, as they were preparing to go to the front, they'd stop under those amazing Zulu trees and have lunch using linen and, cotton things on the tables. And on Wednesdays, they used to make a toast. They'll say, may our wives and lovers never meet. That's how relaxed they were. They did not know what was coming their way. And then the Zulu on the other side actually deployed King Shaka's military genius of the Izimpondo, where the horn formation, where you've got the head, the chest, the arms, and the horns, whereby they encircled the British. And the contact was so vicious and it was so thorough that the British could not recover on the same day. In fact, the Zulu went, they overwhelmed them with so much precision, and that at 2:00, the sun, there was a sun eclipse. And then the Zulu say, Zababulala washonilanga during the day, meaning they were so successful, even the sun took a bow to them, And the British, they were over strategized. They were not organized. They were not ready for what they expected. But I must say there were some very amazing British soldiers that fought also very well, killed a lot of Zulus, but at the end, they all passed on. You know, the impact of the Zulu defeating the British was so immense that when the news reached England, in number 10 Downing Street, at that time it was Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. This is what he said. He said, who are these amazing people? Who are these remarkable Zulus who defeat my generals, convert my bishops, and put an end to one of Europe's oldest dynasties? What he was referring to, the dynasties, the Zulu are the ones who put an end to the French royal family, because one of their last cousin sons had no children. So he went to the Zulu, he went down to go and fight Isandlwana. The Zulu killed him. So that is why today the French do not have a reigning monarch, because the Zulu took care of that. To this day, they always come in September to where their prince was killed, And then the generals they were talking to, obviously, they were talking about, Chelmsford and all others who got, embarrassed by the Zulu. And with the bishops, they were referring to Bishop Colenso, who was sent to South Africa, if you like, with the Zulu, to come and convert them. But the Zulu ended up converting Bishop Colenso into the Zulu philosophy of religion and thinking. So this is the impact that they had. And yes, the Zulu are the only ones who ever at that time defeated the British. And remember at that time, the British were the greatest power.
Yeah.
They were the equivalent of China or America.
Yeah.
Today.
Hence it's considered, what happened then, this Isandlwana War, considered one of Britain's worst colonial defeats. It's 13 minutes before 11 o'clock. We'll come back with some of your questions. If you have any, 011-883-0702 is the number to call. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. We're talking about the Isandlwana War. So we've been talking about this, also known as the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879. What are your recollections? Anything you've read in history that piqued your interest around this war? Anything that confused you want clarity around? Give us a call or send us a WhatsApp voice note. 12 minutes now before 11.
You're with Clement Manyathela.
702. Let's walk the talk.
It's 10 minutes before 11 o'clock. We are talking about the Isandlwana War, also known as the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879. If you've got questions around this period in our history, you can give us a call or send us a WhatsApp voice note. We've been in conversation with Shalo Mbatha, who is an author and Royal Zulu historian. In fact, let me go to your WhatsApps first, and then I've got some questions that are coming through. Some of you want to know what ultimately led to the end of the war. Some of you are asking about how many people were killed during that war. We'll get into that in a moment. Here's a WhatsApp voice note that's come through.
Hi, Clement. I'm so amazed, shocked that Russia is part of the 6 nations that came over. I've always thought of Russia as a non-colonizer, I guess that's how uneducated I am. But I am shocked and I'm glad now. I know. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. I'll get Shalo to come back with that. Someone else says, hi Clement, how were they communicating, the Zulus and the British, due to the language barrier? Walter says, Clement, I'm loving this. The way this woman is breaking down the Battle of Isandlwana is spot on. That 1879 war where the Zulu army used Shaka's cow horn formation to outsmart and crush the British, pure African brilliance. It's still one of the greatest military upsets in history, and a powerful reminder of our strategic genius. Shalo, if you can comment about Russia, but also this question around what the communication was like between the Zulus and the British, because there was a language barrier there.
Okay. I feel for what the sister said. It also broke my heart. However, remember, it was a sign of the times. It was colonial times. It was in the 18th century, And remember, it was not the current Russian government that was in part of this. It was Imperial Russia. And the people who came to South Africa, like all other whites that came at that time, were mercenaries, adventurers. It's a nice way of saying they were pillagers, They came to Africa or South Africa because they were hungry. You cannot be a successful person in your country and then go into a ship and travel for 6 months and hope to get lucky. So those were desperados. So she mustn't worry too much. Russia is on our side at the moment, and I think it's looking good. Having said that, the language thing, no problem. King Shaka, with his genius, I told you, and his brilliance, he had a whole a regiment called Indumezulu, which were between the ages of 18 and 20, that he had trained in modern arms, number one. And secondly, he had made all those mercenaries that are crash landed on our shores, that they teach us, the Zulu English. So at that time, there was a whole category of people who could speak English. And the language was no more a problem at all. Remember, even before King Cetshwayo came into being, during King Dingane's time, they already started translating the Bible. Remember, I spoke about Bishop Colenso, who had translated, with the help of Zulus, obviously, the Bible into isiZulu. So the language wasn't a problem whatsoever. And yes, the victory in the Sangana was not luck, it was by design. It just shows that strategy and spirit can momentarily overturn a whole empire.
Yeah, indeed.
Clement?
Here's another WhatsApp voice note that's come through.
Good morning, Clement. I would just like to ask about the colonial period. Was there any record kept of how many resources were looted, how much of each resource, and why are we not asking for reparations for colonial times? Thanks.
Yeah, that conversation has been there before. I'll get Shalo to respond to that, the issue of the records of resources that were looted and the issue of reparations. But before she responds, let's go to Kumalo, who's calling us from Ngutu in KwaZulu-Natal. Kumalo, good morning.
Hi, how are you, sir?
Sure, man, go ahead.
I'm good, thanks. I just want to find out from the lady, because she said there were 6 nations, British, French, and other people. So there's a tombstone, actually there's a grave in Ngutu. It's about 20 kilometers from Ngutu. The guy's name is written Prince Imperial, but they said it was Napoleon Bonaparte. Does she know anything about that? She was part of that Sandwana battle.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to find out.
So there's the tomb known as Napoleon Bonaparte.
No, yes, it was, because every year in July, the French embassy and the other people from France, they come there every year. Even if we were young, we used to see white people, so because we were not exposed. So we used to be surprised. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? We used to drive cars. The place called Mvunyana.
Got it.
Even July, they were there. They were there in July.
All right, Kumalo, got it. Thank you so much for your call. Yeah, Shalo?
Let's start with the looted.
Yes.
The guy who called. I'm so happy because I think from his accent, he sounds white. Please give him my number so we can start that movement of getting our things that are stuck in England and in France. I have sleepless nights thinking about what the British took from us. And yes, there's been a conversation about reparations, but South Africa is in a very messy place. We can't even look outside first. But look, I'm happy. I'll lead the charge to go and get our things back. By the way, they did not only loot our resources, our wealth. Okay, they still continue in other means, but they also cut off the heads of our ancestors, and they keep, even today, they still keep them in jugs with, in the museums. We need to go and get those heads. I even discussed it with His Majesty, the late one, that we need to go and get the heads of our ancestors. So that place is a very open source still. And also, King Cetshwayo, when he was, after in Sandwana War, he then organized himself to go to London to go and negotiate his release, because they then put him in exile in Cape Town. He then got on a boat, he went to England and spoke to Queen Victoria. And the place where he was staying is still there. There's a blue plaque written, this King Cetshwayo lived. It's in Mulberry Place, in Kensington. So anyone who goes to visit London, please go around there and pay your respects. Because King Cetshwayo, even in those days, managed, to stare down Queen Victoria, powerful as she was, to say, listen, I've defeated you. You need to let me go back home. And yes, I was 3 months in advance. I said it was in September. The guy that the brother spoke about is Prince Imperial Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. It is a cousin of Louis Bonaparte. He was killed on the 1st of June. There's the guy I was referring to about earlier on.
And then there's a question here about other battles that the Zulus lost around the same time. I think there was the Battle of, is it the Rockers Drift? Can you tell us what that was about and what it meant at the time?
Well, the British like gloating about Rockstriff. For us, Zulus, it's neither here nor there. I'll tell you why. The major war had been lost, number one. Number two, the Zulu fought. That battle lasted for 9 months. It started in January 22nd, 1879, and it stopped in September sometime. Now, the Zulu, they were at war with all the different fresh troops coming in from England. They had no time to rest. And as a human being, there's only so much pressure that you can take. They couldn't even plow the fields because the British were all over the kingdom trying to save their face for having lost the war. So basically, by the time, and also in perspective, it was only a small number of a regiment that felt for their own pride. They'd been denied the honor of being a Sandwan and the battlefield, the battle theater of Sandwan. So when they saw this British outpost, they went to storm it. They wanted to, so they could tell their, descendants that, look, I also took part, I was not part of the reserve force. So basically, the Zulu went there, they stormed it, and the British killed that small regiment. But they needed to gloat, they needed to save their face. It's as though that was like a breaking point of the army. No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. The war only stopped in September because the Zulu were hungry, they were tired, and there was no food. Okay? And Clement, I think your listeners are going to like to hear this. Then in July, they went and burnt our capital, Ulundi, which they've never even apologized for. So King Tetshwayo retreated into the mountains and into the caves. So they went and found him. The day he was brought back when he was now on his way to England, when they took him to exile, the day the British brought him to go and talk to General Worsley, something amazing happened. The very British soldiers that he had defeated, they stood in guard of honor, 100 of them, 50 this side, 50 that side. They stood in honor and in guard, and they saluted him as he walked through them. Okay, now it meant even though he was defeated, they still respected his brilliance in war. So it's not lost. If the British want to gloat about Rockstriff, let them knock themselves out.
Shalo Mbatha, fascinating stuff. Author and Royal Zulu historian. Thank you so much for making time for us. This has been so informative.